Warner Brothers originally wanted John Travolta to the voice of Dean and have Arnold Schwarzenegger do the voice of Kent Mansley. That would have been really off.
Yeah, that would not have worked.
Wrong.
Huh. I read the short story that it's based on.
Really?
Yeah.
Cool.
It was like 20 pages.
Wow, that's a lot shorter than I even was expecting.
Yeah. Unless I didn't read the right one, but I think I did. It's called The Iron Man.
The Iron Man. It's a novel. It says it's 59 pages.
So maybe I read a different version, but I'm pretty sure I read the
Did you read the version where there was like a dragon that he fights?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, you read the right version. It was probably just like...
condensed or something, yeah.
Yeah. Welcome to VCR, a vintage cinema rewind. We're bringing old movies to new viewers. I'm Blake.
I'm Jason.
You stay, I go, no follow. And I'll see you on the next one, buddy. Jason's doing this.
All right, I guess I'm doing this one, yeah.
This week we're doing The Iron Giant from 1999, our first animated film on the podcast.
Yeah, and I was pretty pumped about this because I remember it like heavily from my childhood.
And I didn't remember this. I remembered the parts of the ending, and I know I've watched it. I had to think back, and I remember one of my friends really loved this movie growing up, so I definitely had seen it with him.
Anyone who happened to have watched it when it came out loves it. It's just they completely butchered the marketing.
Yeah, it's a sleeper hit. It came out to a lot of critical success with absolutely no viewership at the time, which is really fascinating to see a movie that flops, but through word of mouth grows to be something so culturally influential.
Yeah, and it only flopped because of the marketing, like the decisions of Warner Brothers to not market this. So, like, how many other movies are there? There's not that many because this one actually, built its own, thing.
It's a cult movie, and it very easily slots into a cult film. And I think the tone of the film and the art direction, a lot of that really ingrains itself into becoming that cult classic.
Yeah, it's the Iron Giant. It's a simple concept. An iron giant crashes down to Earth, and a young boy, Hogart Hughes, befriends him. It's set in 1957. Hogarth is just basically trying to keep the giant a secret from the townspeople and the military, while teaching the giant that it can be a good robot.
Yeah, and not an evil gun.
Yeah.
I think it's really important during the plot here to also set the tone of the film and describe what the tone of the film is, because in the opening sequence, as we see the giant land on Earth, we see the Sputnik satellite moving around the Earth, and that's the first man-made satellite to be sent to space. And that's the mood that we're in. We're in 1957. It's the first 10 years of the Cold War. With
the Red Scare is in full effect in America.
Yeah, and so that kind of mood is ever present throughout the film of what these people are living through at that time in America. And we're also a little bit in the America kind of mood as well, right? Like we're the unbeatable, unstoppable king of the world right now. Like this is the peak of
hardcore patriotism for the people. And when you're looking at how often this comes up, it's one character's full his whole personality is based around this basically, and then you also catch glimpses of it in the TV that Hogarth is watching, and there's a little jingle on how to hide under your desk if the Russians are gonna nuke us.
which as an adult you watch that and you're like, yeah, that was never gonna work.
But it was just a thing to give kids some kind of hope or something.
And that's actually something that I think the movie sets up really well with that. It feels like in the beginning it's going to be a lot of propaganda in the film. But I think the message of the film really pivots away from that and just uses it to kind of get the message across. So let's get into characters and people you may know. Our first and most important character is Hogart Hughes. He's a pretty intelligent kid. He's got a big imagination, loves animals, and he's always making new pet friends because he's also has a lot of problems at school.
Yeah, it seems like at school he was pushed ahead a year because he's smart enough to, but then the older kids are kind of like bully him a little bit. And at home, like, his mom is always working, so he's always trying to make these, like, he always gets some kind of critter and tries to bring it home as a pet.
Yeah, and that sets up his character really well and what his relationship's going to be like with the Iron Giant later.
Yeah.
Hogart Hughes is played by Eli Marienthal, and that's not a household name, actually, surprisingly. And that's partially because he kind of quit acting in the last 10, 15 years or so. What he's also known for, however, which is, I had a really good laugh at this, is he's Stifler's brother in the American Pie series.
Yeah, that was kind of shocking when I read that.
Yeah, so I did some digging on what he's up to these days. He's now a director at the Back to Earth company, which does guided adventures in San Francisco for teenagers.
Huh.
So yeah, they go out in the outback, which is pretty cool.
Interesting. Okay.
Pretty cool experience. It was very expensive to get those guided tours, so you got to have a little bit of money down there to be doing that. But I imagine if you're living in the Bay Area, that you probably have enough money to be able to afford that for your kids.
Yeah.
So the Iron Giant is the next character that I wanted to discuss. He's the giant metal man from outer space, as you said. We don't ever really find out necessarily what his motivations are for coming to Earth or who sent him or anything like that.
It's like when he crashed down, he forgot.
Yeah, and that's kind of explained as he got some sort of bump on his head when he crash landed.
Yeah.
And that plays a part in the film as well. That's really not what the point of the film is about, though, so I think they do a good job at kind of leaving a lot of that vague, and it never really feels like it matters either.
Yeah, like, it's still just like a discovery of who he is, like, the whole throughout the film, and we do kind of find out that he may have been made for destruction.
Yeah.
Or at least protection. So it's interesting to look at his motivations, like because it is exploring what he was created for and who he wants to be, everything in between there.
And that's a central theme of the film that we'll get into a little bit later.
And that's Vin Diesel.
Yes, played by Vin Diesel.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Did you know that going in? Because
I did. Like, I told Annabelle that it was Vin Diesel, and she's like, yeah, okay. Like, and I was like, I remember this from, like, way back, that I know it's him, but I had to check it again.
And we discussed Vin Diesel on a previous episode, actually the last episode.
Yeah.
And so knowing that, he's one of your favorite actors.
Yeah, he is.
So I'm sure you were really excited about this. So obviously Vin Diesel is known for like the Fast and the Furious series, the Riddick series, which is a great...
ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's absolutely a great series.
Yeah.
I wish you did more.
Yeah, it's really good. And then the Guardians of the Galaxy and the Marvel Cinematic Universe, obviously, as well as Groot.
I am Groot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, it's the same character, just, well, it's different characters for sure, but he's such a good voice for that type of character.
Yeah, I agree. He also, previous to this, had a supporting role in Saving Private Ryan, which is kind of what started his career. Yeah, and gaining in popularity. I didn't realize that. I couldn't remember him in there, and then I looked up some screenshots of the film, and I was like, oh yeah, he was there.
Yeah, I saw him after I rewatched that movie like 5 years ago after watching it previously, and I was like, is that Vin Diesel? Because I was getting into all of his movies back then, and he's got a great career arc. The way I think I read about it or heard about it, he was found just 18 or 19, and him and his friends were vandalizing, like spray painting inside a theater that they broke into, and somebody in the theater was like, hey, say this, and he said it with his like crazy ass voice, and he's like, I think I have a job for you.
Nice.
And then that's how he got into acting.
That's really cool. There's a few big actors that have over the years kind of stumbled into roles similar to like a Harrison Ford getting found by Steven Spielberg. So. Yeah. Vin Diesel is known for being a really big geek, so I'm sure he jumped at the chance to do some sort of sci-fi film like this. Yeah,
especially somewhat early on in his career. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's with some other big actors.
Oh, like, yeah. We haven't even gotten into some of the big actors yet. Like Hogart Hughes actors a lot less know. Hogarth?
Yeah.
Oh, man. I wrote it down.
Unless I'm completely wrong from me listening. This out. I wrote it down as Hogarth.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. It's Hogarth. Okay. Yeah. Why did I write that down as Hogart?
Did you spell it like yogurt? Hogart.
That's ridiculous. Yeah, okay, let's get into the other big actors that are involved here. Annie Hughes. So Hogart Hughes' mom is played by Jennifer Aniston.
Yeah.
Of all people. And I thought that voice maybe sounded familiar, but I was not expecting Jennifer Aniston here. That's a household name from Friends alone.
Yeah, especially in 1999.
Oh, yeah. They could have marketed having her involved in this film, and that alone probably would have put seats in the theaters, probably.
Yeah, 100%.
Not seats in the theaters, because there are already seats there, but probably some butts in the
Butts in the seats. Butts in the theaters, yeah.
She's also well known for We're the Millers, the film that popularized No Ragrats, not even one.
Yeah.
And most recently did The Morning Show, which is an Apple...
Very good.
Yeah, TV exclusive. You watched it,
Yeah. It's an intense ride, that one.
Yeah, and so Annie Hughes is raising Hogarth as a single mom. She's busy at her job at the diner. She doesn't have a whole lot of time to be around Hogarth, but she's doing the best she can. So, and this is maybe the first time that I want to bring up the connection to E.T.
Yeah.
Because the DNA of E.T. runs very deep in this film.
For sure. We
could kind of draw that comparison to the mother in the E.T. films being single mom. We don't really know what happened to Hogarth's father at all.
No. I thought he turned into an iron giant. No. Yeah, we don't know.
But that's my first connection to E.T., and I'll be bringing that up later as well. Dean Mccoppen. So Dean's the owner of the junkyard. He has the really hilarious scene with the squirrel at the beginning of the film.
And you could kind of tell he's hungover, and then is introduced to this super excited and excitable 10-year-old kid who's lost his pet squirrel. It ends up his pants, and he has to like pull down his pants in front of everybody. Yeah. It's great scene, great intro.
Yeah, the way that plays out is really fun. And later he finds Hogarth and the Iron Giant at night, which I probably don't want to describe any further than that for spoiler reasons. Dean Mccoppen is played by Harry Connick Jr., and that name was really familiar to me, but I couldn't place where I knew that name from. He's actually a really famous jazz singer.
Like, he's been in quite a few movies.
Yeah, they were slightly lesser known films.
Independence Day. That's, I think I remember looking or seeing his name when we didn't do an Independence Day episode, did we?
No, we have not done Independence Day.
Okay, but I watched it recently then. Yeah.
Yeah, his most famous album is When My Heart Finds Christmas from the early 90s, but his highest charting album is Only You from 2004.
He was in P.S. I Love You.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
A jazz player in a romance.
Yeah, I think he played a character that wasn't just like the singer though.
Yeah, so he's got some involvement in film as well.
Yeah.
Next, we have Kent Mansley, who is the first FBI agent to be sent to essentially dismiss whatever's going on as a hokey nothingburger.
Yeah.
Nothingburger. And he has very little faith in the townspeople.
Yeah, he hears some kind of crazy story. They have to investigate, and he's the guy who's sent. He's like bored of this small town, doesn't believe anyone.
Yeah, immediately bored with the small town, but also very aspirational, looking to rise up in the U.S. intelligence and potentially political sphere, maybe even through the military at some point. He's played by Christopher McDonald. And this voice, I was like, the whole movie, I was like, I know this voice. Where does this voice come from? It's Shooter McGavin from Happy Gilmore.
Yeah. Again, he's a face that, like, you see and you know him.
Yeah.
But he's not, like, a massive, like, household name, really, like, by the name. Maybe for older people, I don't know, with Thelma and Louise.
Yeah, he had a great run. The last 10 years, he's actually made a lot of TV appearances. So
yeah, I feel like that's where I've seen him.
Yeah, he played Bob Bennett in American Crime Story, and in the show Ballers, he was the Dallas Cowboys owner.
Yeah, quite early in the Ballers seasons, I think.
Yeah, his character and his portrayal is really great. He's he's very unhinged throughout the film.
Yeah.
And just constantly hunting Hogarth and the Giant.
Yeah, and he's the one who's like super, like he fully believes in like the America versus the red commies and everything in that area. He's like very fear driven.
Yeah. I have a line from later. I don't usually have lines, but I have one line from later that I had a really good laugh at from him.
Okay.
So that's most of the characters of people you may know that you should kind of know going in. The film itself is directed by Brad Bird, and that's a name that didn't ring any bells at first, but he's a very prolific animation director. So I actually wanted to read out his filmography. We've got The Iron Giant, followed by The Incredibles, followed by Ratatouille, then Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, Tomorrowland, and The Incredibles 2. That's a pretty good run, especially considering the animation films in there. Like, The Incredibles is probably, I think, touches my top 5 animation films of all time.
Yeah, it's a great world, and they built it out so well, and all the characters.
Yeah, like, I don't know how many times I've watched that growing up, but it's got to be in the 20s.
Yeah, and then like when they started continuing the series, like as we got older, like it was a must watch for most people who grew up around our age.
I've never seen The Incredibles 2, though.
Really?
No, yeah.
Oh, well, it's a must watch.
Oh, well, I should watch it.
Yeah.
He also did some voice acting as well in a few of his films. He did the voice of Edna Mode in The Incredibles, which is hilarious.
He did? No way. That's hilarious. That's some good acting.
Yeah. I didn't read into how he got into that role, but I'm sure maybe some smoking was involved.
Yeah.
To get that voice the way it was.
Yeah, and he was also just in, like, he's so surrounded by all the Pixar films, like all the Cars movies, Toy Story.
Yeah, he did have involvement in those.
Inside Out. He's on the senior creative team at Pixar, I guess.
Yep.
For a lot of these.
Very, very important director of probably a lot of millennial and Gen Z's childhoods.
Yeah.
So let's get into who this movie is for. My question to you is this a film for children? And what age range do you think a kid's going to most absorb this at?
I think it is a great film for kids. What age? I would say like 10. Like, get them right around the same age as the character and let them see what kind of death is like.
It is a movie very much about death.
Yeah, like the concept of it, we don't see too much. It's like there's some sacrifice and things like that, but it's not like super heavy, but it nails it at the right moments and really helps the Iron Giant to understand what death is, which like a kid would understand, and like it's a good outlet for that, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I think you nailed it with around the age of 10 was where I'd maybe show this to my kids. I think this is something that you get through all of the Disney classics, you get through some of the DreamWorks classics and some of the other animation studios, and this is kind of a little bit more advanced film beyond a lot of those.
Yeah. Like it's not just like Finding Nemo or something. It's a little bit farther.
Yeah, it's a little bit more involving. You have to kind of understand, not necessarily what 1957 was like, but you have to understand a little bit of history.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you said, it delves into some dark concepts like death. Some of the scenes later in the film, I went, "Wow, that was really
intense.
dark.
Yeah,
that was intense. Like,
yeah.
I don't think I could show a younger kid this." I kind of wondered. I bounced this idea around as well. If this is a better watch as an adult, I think anyone who grew up in the 50s is going to really love this.
Yeah.
As well as probably the 60s and 70s too. So I think this is a film that you show to your kids, but maybe you secretly enjoyed a little bit more or understood a little bit more than they did.
Yeah, it's like, especially when it came out, like the people who were watching it as adults then, they had some experience. They definitely, like, almost for sure had some experience with that environment. But yeah, and I think just as a millennial, like, this is a classic for whoever happened to see it when it came out, and like however it got passed around and turned into a cult classic. It's perfect 1999, I feel like.
Yeah, and it doesn't have the CGI elements because it is an animation, so it's a film that doesn't become dated by that time frame that it came out in. I always enjoy films that take a look back at the past because they also, when done right, they don't date themselves in the time that they are made as well.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that if you're a fan of sci-fi films or even monster movies, I think you could probably get some enjoyment out of this. The Iron Giant is a very interesting character, and there's definitely more that meets the eye there.
Yeah.
So, Transformers reference.
Yeah.
So I think that as a fan of sci-fi, there's definitely something to be said about this film.
It would be a good way to get a kid into sci-fi, I think, too.
Yes.
Like, to introduce the idea.
Yeah, because it's
like,
a little light on the sci-fi elements. Like we kind of discussed before, they don't really dive into the Iron Giant's backstory. Again, that's not the focus of the film.
I think so. In the extended or director's cut or whatever, they added 2 scenes.
Yep.
One of them is the Iron Giant remembering being with a bunch of other ones and protecting a planet or attacking a planet or something like that.
Oh, interesting.
So we could get into that a little bit, but it's already hinted at.
Yeah.
Which, like the majority of the heavy sci-fi stuff is just hinted at. Where it's such a good introduction to it, especially for a kid, might be just the idea of like having your own robot that's like 100-foot robot, which is like what Hogarth gets to experience.
I think if your kids are big fans of the E.T. movie, then they're going to enjoy this one as well. And it has that similar dark elements to it.
I think this would be less scary.
This is probably less scary than E.T.
There's not really anything scary about this. I think any kid would watch this and see like he would be really they would be really into like the story, and if they don't get the death part, if it's not that, like, they might not get everything there, but it could introduce them to the idea for later. I don't know. Who's this for? We've covered a lot of people.
Yeah.
Kids, adults.
And it's pretty easily digestible film.
Yeah. It's a good Friday night, I think, after a long week.
Yeah, for me, I went to watch is actually Sunday with a family. I think this is a Sunday afternoon, like late Sunday afternoon, early Sunday evening kind of film.
Know what else? I would say it's a decent hungover movie.
Really Speaking easy from experience.
Yeah. Really easy to throw on, and like, it's enjoyable. You don't have to pay that much attention.
Yeah.
But if you do, it's enjoyable. So
yeah, I think the opening act of the film really sets the tone of the film really well, but it might not necessarily draw you in immediately. I think for me, when I really started to get into the film was right around the time that Kent Mansley shows up, because that's when Hogarth is really starting to build a relationship with the Iron Giant.
Yeah.
And that for me was when I started to get interested in the film.
Yeah.
Before that, I was maybe a little bit too hyper-focused on the propaganda stuff and thinking like, is this movie just going to be about propaganda? But no, not at all.
Yeah.
Where to watch? Right now, you can stream this on Crave, or Stars through Crave or Prime. It's also on Hoopla, which is something that I hadn't heard of previously, but it's actually a library database.
Oh.
That as long as you have a library card, and with the asterisk of you also need to have that library card in the jurisdiction that has this movie available to rent, then you can do it. So unfortunately for our area, it wasn't streaming on, or it wasn't available to rent. But if you lived, I believe in the Toronto area, you actually could get it. So
okay, cool.
But yeah, it's kind of neat that you can rent movies to the library online.
Yeah, there's quite a few streaming platforms kind of that are linked with libraries. One that we have is Canopy. So that's I actually watched a lot of the Alone series.
Oh, really?
On Canopy, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
So yeah, just library card. Honestly, libraries are an amazing resource for everything that you wouldn't expect. In like, they have a lot of tech and like modern things.
Yeah, like 3D printers.
Yeah, like a lot of them are building up to be those kind of community centers. So
yeah,
shout out to libraries and librarians.
Yeah, Jason's trying to earn points with Justin Annabelle here. And as always, we find where these are streaming through Just Watch, which is our go-to, which we do not have a sponsorship for, but both of us love it so much that we like to talk about it.
Honestly, almost every, like, it's so hard to just find what movie, like, if you know what movie you want to watch and you don't know where to find it, where else can you check? Like,
literally, I don't know.
You have
Google
to go
is
through
worse.
each. Yeah, you can't just Google it because where, like, which location are you in Canada? Are you in US? Are you in Europe? Wherever you're watching from. So you have to search through each platform, and each platform is a little bit different and a little bit worse than the other at different things. So searching just sucks.
Yeah. So use Just Watch because it's awesome.
Yes.
And someday, hopefully, we can work out a sponsorship deal.
That would be cool.
So I think this is the time to cut it off and say we did our best to talk spoiler-free. This movie is definitely worth a watch. I think we can both say that we'd slap a recommend on this one for general audiences.
Yeah.
And
this isn't like a super film buff type of movie, but it's like for everyone.
Yeah, it's a good watch.
Yeah. So it's a nice mix up with some of our heavier theme, like
it's
movies.
not an Oscar film,
no,
that's for sure.
Yeah.
This movie doesn't take itself too seriously either. Yeah, that's the point where we'll cut it off. If you've already watched the film and you want to dive into things a little bit deeper, now is the opportunity to do so. So let's dive into it. Spoiler full. Full of spoilers.
Full spoilers.
Fill me full of spoilers.
Full fat.
Okay.
Do you have any spoilers? I don't. I'm just kidding.
I don't even remember watching the movie. Let's start with themes. The main central theme of the film is basically how the movie was pitched itself.
Yes.
And the way that Brad Bird pitched the film is, what if a gun had a soul and didn't want to be a gun? And that's something that kind of gets brought up throughout the film. Is if you really dive into the meaning of that, it's who do you want to be as a person, basically? Like, the gun element is there because the Iron Giant is some sort of weapon.
Yeah.
And because we don't know the backstory, we don't know if he is solely meant to be protection or if he is a
offensive
weapon. An offensive weapon. That kind of plays a large role in the film of, like, Hogarth trying to teach the Iron Giant, like, I don't know, just how to learn how to be more human, I guess.
Yeah.
And Hogarth as well, being kind of a troubled kid and having all of his problems at school, is also kind of trying to figure himself out as well.
Yeah, like where you fit in a world when you don't understand exactly who you are yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the people around you don't understand who you are, who they are yet either.
Yeah, because you're a little different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other source of this film is an actual short story called The Iron Man. Who was that by?
Ted something.
Ted Hughes.
Ted Hughes. So Hogarth gets his name from this short story as the boy in the short story. His name is Hogarth, and then he didn't have a last name, so Ted Hughes. They used Ted Hughes' last name as his last name for the movie. So there's quite a few comparisons to be made there because I read the story.
Yeah.
And it gets a little more crazy in the short story than this. And I think they did a great job of like keeping it to what was essential for audiences to see.
Like the maybe the opening part of the film is pretty similar, in that the Iron Giant comes and he meets Hogarth, but it sounds like things take a really drastic turn and it becomes like a kaiju monster movie by the end a little bit, or monster novel.
Something like that. Like it was like a mix of like it had like the ideas that were kind of from. It's almost like a Lord of the Rings meets space by the end of the. So basically, the Iron Man, he befriends the boy, and they bring him to the scrapyard to eat their junk metal, and then all of a sudden, a giant space lizard who's the size of Australia crashes down on Australia.
Yeah,
he's quite like he's way too massive. People are watching this space dragon fly towards the Earth for like days before it shows up. It's like this burning thing in the sky, but then it turns into a dragon by the time it gets closer. And the dragon wants to eat only live things. And he wants, if humanity doesn't give him enough food, he'll just start licking cities off the globe. And it's just completely insane and out of nowhere. What I really did like about the short story was how the Iron Giant actually showed up. He showed up, crashed into the sea, just like in the movie. But then he like at some point got on top of a mountain and he fell down the mountain. And all his he broke apart. All his limbs were
like we see later
scattered
in the film.
Yeah, and they were scattered all over. And what I liked more, just like a tiny little thing, was that only his hands really worked separately than the rest of his body.
Oh, okay.
So his hand, like his one hand, went and found an eye, and then it explains like how it carried the eye underneath its middle finger, and it would look through the pointer and thumb finger, and then it was crawling around for like a few days until it found another piece, and then it like collected itself back together. So they did the same, like a similar thing, except each part of the Iron Giant has like a homing device, and it can wiggle its way back towards the Iron Giant when it breaks.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's actually a sign of the times of when the original novella was written and when the movie came out, because it looks like the Iron Man came out in 1968, whereas the film itself came out in 1999, and I imagine that maybe that level of sci-fi hadn't been really explored yet.
Yeah, like it was at the cusp of it.
Yeah, like that self-assembly idea.
Yeah.
But
I loved the like reading the way the hand carried, and then like it met up with another hand, and then they found another eye, so that they had two eyes each carried in a hand, and then they found a leg, and it explained like how it was like perched on top of the leg, is as if it was like its own little alien robot until it found the rest.
Interesting.
It was a nice little read. And then at the end, where I was saying it's kind of similar to Lord of the Rings-esque, is where the Iron Man in the book has to like outwit the giant lizard. He basically tricks him to go into the sun.
Okay.
Through like kind of riddles or something like that. So that's where the source material came from, and they did a great job in cutting that craziness out and just focusing on like the human element. Yeah, it was nice to read and see.
I guess the other part of the Iron Man, and maybe the connection there and why it's now called the Iron Giant, is because they didn't want to have this film obviously connected to Iron Man from Marvel, so they just changed that slightly. I think Iron Giant sounds better as well, has kind of a nice ring to it.
Yeah, because the Iron Man could be any size. Right?
This is true. Yeah. This is true.
Oh, and also in the book, the Iron Man, he had like different metals that tasted better to him and that he hadn't experienced yet. So like he really liked certain ovens with because they had some chrome on them or something like that. And like, but you get to see that kind of the way the Iron Giant eats certain things. He at one point like pulls everything off kind of like a skewer.
Yeah.
And then he eats the skewer. Yeah.
Effects and filming. This is our first animation film, and it was actually a Warner Brothers animation film. So it has a pretty different style to Disney or DreamWorks that you might be visually used to seeing. I guess the origins of this visual style come from the movie Quest for Camelot. It's largely the same team that worked on that. That's a movie that I have absolutely no memory of.
It failed horribly. I
yeah,
thought.
It did fail horribly.
That's why they didn't want to put any marketing or like barely any marketing into the Iron Giant.
Right.
So because of a previous movie's failure, they were like, no, let's not hype this up because it might be just as bad.
It's wild that was really the only piece that hurt this movie is in the decision of how they were going to market it. Like they just didn't care.
Yeah.
And actually, this is something that I was reading about this morning, is that the reason why the film actually even became relevant later is in its syndication on TV. It became a really important film for... First, it was a July 4th film, probably connected to Independence Day, right?
Yeah.
Being the children's Independence Day.
Yeah.
But then later, it became a really popular film during Thanksgiving in the U.S.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it apparently plays every Thanksgiving, The Iron Giant. I don't know why. I guess being thankful
It's one of those cult things, like you have to watch certain movies at certain times.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I definitely have a few films like that where I just happen to watch it at certain times of the year.
You know what I kind of want to say the animation is? It's like it's almost like 101 Dalmatians.
Mm-hmm. And they were influenced by 101 Dalmatians.
Yeah, like the color palette is kind of this, like the feel of it is kind of there, but then it's also like halfway between that and like modern things like Finding Nemo. Mm-hmm. Like it's right in between there. The posters are phenomenal.
The posters are fantastic. I would put the Iron Giant poster up in a heartbeat. It is so visually creative. It almost is like a throwback to like a 50s style comic book or sci-fi film. It's great. I love the poster. If you haven't seen it, Google it. It's really visually stunning.
Yeah, and just the construction of the Iron Giant. Like it's unique, but it just like hints back at like old school robots.
Yeah,
that, like a bunch of like the Rock'em Sock'em robots almost.
Mm-hmm. And when he
just
transforms
that old vibe.
into the gun as well, there's a lot of references even within the guns. Like very specifically, I would say War of the Worlds had some influence there. Like
the tentacles
and stuff.
Yeah,
I kind of wonder if the giant like massive gun in the middle had some influence by Independence Day, because that's a little bit similar to the guns that the aliens used that they were shooting down.
Yeah, it's like the underside of ship.
Yeah.
Kind of. Yeah.
For me, the animation style, it immediately there's two movies that kind of came up in my brain while we were watching.
Yeah.
And that was Anastasia.
Yes. Okay, yeah.
Which is 20th Century Fox, so different studio.
Yeah.
And Eight Crazy Nights, the Adam Sandler movie.
Okay, yeah, I see, like, similar.
Yeah.
Somewhere in between those two again, yeah.
Yeah, and so I did some digging, and Eight Crazy Nights did have the same studio involved in some of the animation there, so I was right.
That's cool, yeah. And then Atlantis is also similar.
Yeah, and Titan AI or AE?
AE, yeah.
Titan AE, which is a film that you've talked about a few times.
Yeah, it was one that I loved as a kid, but I don't know if it holds up.
Same studio, though.
Seen it. Okay, cool.
Yeah, that's something that we'll have to watch at some point as well. Maybe next year's animated film.
Maybe.
In the opening kind of credits, we see Pete Townshend's name came up. And that's a name that, as someone who listens to the music that I listen to, was vaguely familiar in my head, and I went, I think I know who that is.
Yeah.
And that is the singer of The Who.
Yeah. Okay. I couldn't place the name, but as soon as you said it, I didn't notice it, but yeah.
Yeah, so Townsend actually, years before this, started to adapt the Iron Man as a musical.
Oh, okay.
Huh. Yeah, so he composed the songs from it. Some of the songs you can actually listen to, they were released. There's A Friend is a Friend and I Won't Run Anymore, as well as Fire. So if you look up any of those songs, as well as Dig, it looks like, you can listen to some of those. So they had a stage version that they were going to create, and because it was just like a musical like album that they released that was that you didn't go and see kind of thing.
Yeah.
So they were going to actually do a stage version in 1993, and then Warner Brothers decided to buy the rights to the story, basically.
Okay.
But the end result is very different from both the book and the musical. Brad Bird decided to go in a very different direction.
Yeah. So yeah, that's cool. The songs are so relevant to the short story.
Yeah.
Because the townspeople, they're mostly all farmers in the book. They dig a really deep hole, and first they put like a nice shiny tractor on top of this hole that they've covered up so that he'll fall through.
Oh yeah.
But then the robot doesn't come, or the man doesn't come back, and then eventually Hogarth tricks him into falling into the hole because the farmer needed his tractor back. But yeah, so he tricks him into falling into the hole, and he felt really guilty about it. And then they filled in the hole, and so he was stuck under there for like a good 3 years. I feel like to the point where people didn't really remember that, like, why he was
just
down
something
there.
that happened. Yeah.
But there was a big hill there, and people go there to picnic. And then there's a family that's having a picnic, and then they hear some rumbling, and he comes out of the ground, like, and he has their picnic still on his head. So like some of the humorous scenes are still like make it into. This is a funny movie.
Yeah, it's got some really great comedy. One of my favorite scenes is when Dean gets Hogarth all hopped up on caffeine.
Yeah.
And he's explaining all his troubles.
Yeah. That was a very classic scene. I really like too when the Iron Giant holds the car, and then Hogarth sits in the car and he just spins him around.
He's like Dean's trying to get him to create art, and then Hogarth's like, "What are you doing? Like, why are you wasting his talents?" And then we get that crazy scene with the car spinning around,
like he's in a spaceship.
Yeah, because that's like way more important than making
Hogarth.
art. The only other piece going back to the musical that I did want to mention is that it looks like there was a role for the space dragon in there, so definitely a lot more similar to the source material. And the music itself, I don't think made it into the film. I think Pete Townsend was maybe a little irritated by that, but at the end of the day, they took a very different direction anyway, so it probably wouldn't have fit.
Yeah.
And on that note, I think that's a good point to segue into score. I don't actually have too much more to add other than Pete Townsend's involvement. However, this was scored by Michael Kamen. Is a pretty relevant composer. He scored the Die Hard series, Lethal Weapon, the Lethal Weapon series, the original X-Men movie, as well as Band of Brothers, which is an extraordinarily famous and popular TV show.
Yeah. Huh.
And so he was looking for like an old school Eastern European orchestral sound, which I
interesting.
Think, yeah, which is a little bit different from maybe the patriotism that we've talked about in the film. But I think the music choice actually does do a good job here. It's not overpowering at any point in time, but it does do a good job in setting the mood. I think that if you made this film taking place in the Soviet Union versus the US, I think because of the music and maybe even the art style a little bit, it would fit there as well.
Yeah, I can see that.
So you've already brought up the movie poster, but look back at the times. I think with this film, you have to look at the inspirations that this film is clearly bringing to the forefront. Like you can see what Brad Bird was inspired by and what he wanted to pay homage to in the film. And E.T.'s absolutely number one.
Yeah.
The final closing scene where we get one of the most famous lines of the film, which I knew this line and I didn't realize that it had come from the Iron Giant, where the Iron Giant says, "You stay, I go, no follow."
Yeah.
That really gave me heavy E.T. vibes, where he's like, "Stay, go," and that kind of final discussion between Elliot and E.T.
And it's like the weight of how much is said in so few words, and Vin Diesel obviously crushed that the same way he did like when Groot was finally like, "We are Groot."
There's something to be said about his timing on some of those lines.
And like there's so much weight behind how he says it.
Yeah, the delivery.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Yeah. Other films that you can draw a lot of comparison to is King Kong for kind of the kaiju monster movie elements. The War of the Worlds, like we talked about. Bambi, because we get the scene with the deer. And getting shot by the hunters, as well as Superman, which is very important to Hogarth at the time.
And to Iron Man, because, like, that's kind of how he teaches him that he could be Galactica or whatever the bad... Atomo, yeah. Mm-hmm. He could be like that and be a destructive robot, but he could also just be Superman.
Yeah.
And he gets to decide that. Yeah.
And there's a lot of callbacks to Superman and the way that he flies.
Yeah.
And even at the very end of the film, where the Iron Giant's going up to stop the nuke.
Yeah.
And Hogarth, he hears in the back of his mind, like, Hogarth saying, "You can be whatever you want to be." And he says, "I am Superman."
Yeah.
Which is really great.
And then at the very end, when he wakes up and his like head is in the snow, it's like the snow castle or whatever Superman has. What's that place called?
Oh, I don't know. My Superman lore is enough. I know what you're talking about, but very vaguely.
I know the name. I just can't remember it. Anyways, so yeah, there's that. Also, like some Frankenstein. Like he's kind of like a Frankensteinish character.
Frankenstein's
monster. Yes.
Let's be tactical about it.
I was referencing the Frankenstein movie as it's called Frankenstein. Anyways.
For me, I think you can even maybe compare this to Star Wars in the Matrix. Not in terms of inspirations, but I think you can compare them in the sense that you can really feel and see the connections from the films that came before it and how that inspired those films and influenced them, and how those films ended up becoming the top of their game. Because Star Wars is one of the greatest pieces of sci-fi ever, as well as The Matrix and its own mix-up of genres. The Iron Giant is the 23rd highest rated animation film of all time.
Deserves it.
And I believe... No, it doesn't make the top 250 of all movies, but probably just outside of that, I would guess.
Yeah.
And I think it's a pretty important film for maybe not necessarily the monster movie genre or animation films or even kids films, but I think if you're a kid and you watch this film, this is something that you go back and you watch, like a King Kong or E.T. or Superman or any of those, and this starts to build up a love for sci-fi, like you kind of alluded to before.
Yeah. How excited Hogarth gets about having like his own robot, and like how he tries to tell kids at school and like that it's a robot or something like that, or an Iron Giant. I don't know if he call it a robot. I think he does.
He does
like,
call it a robot.
Like he calls it like good robot or something, or like I have my own robot.
Yeah.
It's just like how excited he is. I could see that being infectious for kids, and like maybe that's why I love sci-fi, because I watched this like probably in 1999.
Let's talk legacy. And this, I held my tongue a little bit when we were talking about Vin Diesel's other film roles, because I knew that The Iron Giant was a very critically acclaimed film. It has a very high rating on IMDb. So I actually did a little digging into Vin Diesel's highest rated films. So Saving Private Ryan is his first, which I don't think is his movie. Like he just has an appearance in it and he does a good job in it, but that's very much a Tom Hanks movie.
Yeah.
we go Saving Private Ryan, and then we go his portrayals of Groot in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and then we get the Iron Giant right after that.
Yeah.
So, in a way, the Iron Giant is Vin Diesel's like first stab at creating his peak performance role in Groot.
Yeah, I could see that.
Vin Diesel has maybe a really good general appeal to audiences. Like, the films he makes out aren't always critical darlings, but they're films that people really love.
Yeah,
like, really love.
Yeah. Do you remember his movie Triple X?
Yeah, I do, actually. I really enjoyed Triple X.
One,
yeah, that was a great movie. And then they did a second one, and it was not great.
Yeah, I think, who was it in it? Was it
Ice Cube?
Yeah. That was when he was starting to get into shit movies.
Yeah, those were the movies that were on like MTV and Much Music when we were kids.
Yeah.
And so we watched them probably way too much. Like, I don't know how many times I've seen The Fast and the Furious 2.
Yeah, I loved number 1 and number 2. The rest, they're okay movies.
Yeah.
It's like, they have built something where you like want to have a Corona with the family, but
it's weird how that franchise grew and evolved, because it never, I guess we were young, so maybe it just didn't feel like a franchise at the time, but it really isn't until,
but it was kind of at the beginning of those types of franchises being a thing.
Yeah, it's probably a leader in that genre.
And it almost failed because of number 2 was so different, and they're like, where's Vin Diesel? Like, this isn't right.
Yeah, because itself is kind of a spin-off. That's a weird franchise, because I wouldn't say it becomes a franchise until like the 4th or 5th movie.
Yeah.
They're all just kind of loosely connected films.
Yeah, I think Too Fast, Too Furious is like they brought it back, but was Vin Diesel even in that one?
Yeah, he was. He was in all of them, I think, except for Tokyo Drift in the second one. Was he in Tokyo Drift? I don't think he was.
No, nobody was, except like I guess some characters from that come back, but no one else was.
Yeah. Anyway, the
Iron Giant, yeah.
The movie itself is referenced countless times in the future.
Yeah.
Like, the most recent references are in Ready Player One and Space Jam.
Yes. Yes. I when I saw the one in Ready Player One, I'm pretty sure they do have a full, like, the Iron Giant.
Yeah.
Come out in that. Yeah.
Yeah. Steven Spielberg there paying tribute to the Iron Giant, and definitely in the same sort of genres that Steven Spielberg would put out. So I'm sure he ate this one up when it came out.
Yeah. Oh, so the army cars passing, and that was referenced in Super 8, but like that's kind of like a classic scene that they set up a very good shot of, and that shot I think has been used before.
Let's get into our personal reviews and the partner factor.
All right.
Jess enjoyed this movie, but she was partially distracted, I would say, especially in the first act, while we're just kind of building the world and the characters. But by the end of the movie, she was fully invested. I think she really enjoyed it, and she said so afterwards. For me, I enjoyed this film. It wouldn't go into my favorite film list. Probably also doesn't quite fit into my top 10 or top 20 favorite children's movies either. So you and I might have a little bit of different experiences there. And maybe that's because I just don't remember it very well as a kid. Yeah. So it doesn't bring back that nostalgia factor for me. But I'm not saying that this isn't a great film that you should watch, because I totally think that there's a niche for this, and it, while also having pretty widespread appeal. I think where the film succeeds is in the relationships between each of the characters and the really great heartfelt moments that we get throughout the film.
And that's exactly where it is so nostalgic, I think, for anyone who had watched it and like remembered it early. So like very similar review, except it probably is in my top, like it's definitely in top 10 of like animated kids movies, but it's not like it's not my favorite movie of all time. Yeah. It's very good, and it brings back good feelings and memories and nostalgia and everything. So it's definitely a good rewatch for me. Annabelle missed the third act.
Really?
She was really into it, but like she had to cook her, like there's some things we had to do, but when she came back, like she heard the like intensity of the line when the Iron Giant was like You stay, I go, no following. She's like, are you crying? Like, she called it, like, I was like, no. But I was.
Yeah, I think my mouth was kind of hanging open at that point, and I was just sitting there like, wow, like this is taking quite a turn. This is pretty dark stuff.
Yeah.
And at the end of the movie, we do see the Iron Giant put himself back together again, which I guess I probably should have remembered, although being nuked is probably not great on metal.
Yeah. Well,
but I think that was something that Brad Bird ended up deciding to do just because, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a kid's movie, right?
Yeah.
So,
and it was too logical for the Iron Man to shoot the fucking missile. Why? I don't know. He could have just shot it and went down.
For defense.
Yeah, but he's I'm not a gun, I guess.
Yeah.
But you're a martyr now? Like, but
well,
he might have like assumed that he would come back together.
Yeah, I guess what happens though is if he just shoots the nuke down, like does the army just shoot like 10 more nukes at him? Like I guess
No, I don't think so, because at that point he had proven to the general that he was just like a self-defense thing, and that he was like he was a good giant.
Yeah, but the difference between the general standing there and talking to the townspeople and
the rest of the
how
world.
hilarious is that when he's like to Kent Mansley, he's like, the bomb is targeted at the Iron Giant, and he's like, yes, and he's like, where is the Iron Giant right now?
Yeah. He's like, I don't want to die, and then like he's like, screw America, I don't want to die.
Yeah.
Or screw our country.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's because the general's like, you're gonna die for your country now.
Yeah, and he hops in tries to steal a car, and the Iron Giant just goes, whop.
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah. Great ending. In the short story, the Iron Man's metal gets like shinier and stronger when it's eating better quality, or like more metal and better quality metals. So maybe there's a thing where like if he kind of ingests like the nuclear metal, and he becomes like a super Iron Giant.
Yeah.
When he gets put back together, he might be like imbued with nuclear stuff.
I can't specifically recall what it would be, but I think that there's a movie somewhere where they nuke the monster and then it gets bigger because of the nuke.
Yeah.
Maybe that's Godzilla, but
it was kind of like that in the Fifth Element. They
that's
nuke
true.
it and it gets bigger.
Yeah. I really liked how they built Kent Mansley's character, because I didn't outright think that his character was evil necessarily at the beginning. I thought he was kind of an ass.
An ass, self-serving.
Yeah, exactly. But the way his character...
Self-important, sorry.
Yeah, self-important's a good term. But the way that they frame his character over the course of the film, and he just devolves into more and more paranoid, if is probably the right word, and some of the interactions that he has with Hogarth, like when Hogarth's in the washroom trying to push the hand out, and then they open the door and he's like sitting there like pretending he's pooping. It's pretty funny.
Like there's that whole scene of him trying to hide the hand from the family, or from his mom and Mansley.
When he does the what's it called? The prayer before dinner.
Yeah.
That is so awesome.
Yeah, that was great. Because he sees the hand come in and he's like, "Oh my God." And then he turns that into the prayer. Yeah. And I actually like the way the hand was moving. It was like kind of like it was a little dog. The way it was acting, I liked the that, and it was very similar to the short story. Yeah.
One of my favorite lines, and it's kind of because of where you and I are located out of here, that Jess and I laughed really hard at. It's when Kent Mansley and Hogarth are kind of having the discussion at the diner. They're talking about the dark side of progress and Sputnik, and then Kent Mansley says, "I don't feel safe, Hogarth, do you?" And Hogarth's like, "What are you talking about?" And Kent goes, "What am I talking about?" And then he says, "I'm talking about your goddamn security, Hogarth. While you're snoozing in your Whittle Jammies back in Washington were wide awake and worried. Why? Because everyone wants what we have, Hogarth. Everyone. You think this metal man is fun, but who built it? The Russians? The Chinese? The Martians? Canadians? I don't care.
Yeah.
I like the reference to the Canadians.
Yeah,
there.
That was pretty fun. You could see that he's kind of devolving and getting like
more unhinged.
Yeah, unhinged because he's been waiting and trying to pry this information out of Hogarth for so long. He knows there's an Iron Giant.
Yeah.
But where is it? It's been brewing in his head like who built it.
Yeah, and he also sees this as his path to glory, and he needs this for the army to roll in and him to be the hero of the day.
Yeah, him when he realized the rifle, the like BB gun rifle it said Hog Hug.
Yeah,
and he's like Hog Hug, Hog Hug. That was like a good little scene.
Yeah, Christopher McDonald has a really great role here. Ken Mansley's probably my favorite character of the film.
That's fair. Yeah, he's the most developed besides Hogarth. Really.
Yeah, Hogarth's really great as well, but Kent's just unhinged in all the right ways for me.
Know what I really liked? This is a small thing. When the Iron Giant just squatted down super quick on like over top of Hogarth. It was just like a super quick thing, but it was just like scary and amazing to Hogarth, like how quickly this massive thing just moved towards him. And it was just like a regular squat. And I was actually thinking it's kind of like a Russian, like Slav squat.
Yeah, a little bit. And
then I was like, is he... Well, I already kind of knew, but...
It's the speed at which he moves, too, that is kind of a little bit unnerving because you don't picture something that large to move as quick as he does.
Yeah. Oh, and like when we're introduced to Kent Mansley, he's like, big things happen in big places, Marv. And he's like, are we in a big place? Because he's out in the back country, like Rockwell is like a tiny town. Mm-hmm. He doesn't want to be there. That was a good introduction of him and his like cockiness. He chloroformed a boy.
I wrote that down too. Yeah, like that's kind of out there. That's not something you see in kids' movies.
Yeah, exactly.
that was something else.
Yeah.
What I was going to say before is the moment when we realized that the Iron Giant can fly is another E.T. reference, like, for me.
Yeah, that was great.
That's another callback to that. That's where, I guess, what I was maybe going to say earlier is that, for me, E.T. has the nostalgia factor that this has for me.
Yeah, for me, yeah.
Yeah.
E.T. for you, this for me, kind of,
Yeah, I figured it out.
Yeah. And how they pulled off that the Iron Giant was just an art installation for like a
that
good
was
little
genius.
bit. Yeah.
I had no idea how they were going to play that off.
Yeah, I thought they were just going to hide him. And like, I thought he was just going to have a small sculpture, but then they played him off as the sculpture.
Yeah, which was really smart because then even at that point, like Kent Mansley can't argue because there's a picture of them, but he can't say like oh, it's not just a picture that Hogarth took, like. Yeah, and the army, as soon as the army sees that, is gonna be like, this idiot has like just
gone crazy.
For this kid's like fantasy world, basically.
Kent threatens Hogarth with, "Will make life miserable for your mother," and all that implies, or something like that. And then Hogarth is like, "Bye, Kent," and all that implies.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I don't know if I caught that one. Oh, the only other part that I wanted to just quickly mention is the reference to Rockwell, obviously referencing Roswell, New Mexico.
Yeah.
I like how it's set up in Maine because we could have this in some sort of crazy Stephen King world.
Yeah. Oh.
If Stephen King wanted to write a short story that was adjacent to the Iron Giant,
that would be phenomenal.
That would be pretty wild. Yeah.
Because Hogarth is a perfect name for a Stephen King character, too, I feel like.
Yep. As a side note, when Kent Mansley is making fun of Hogarth's name, I really laughed at that because up until that point, I was like, what kind of a name is Hogarth? Like, why did they land on that?
Yeah.
Because I think this is maybe the only time that the name Hogarth has ever come up, ever.
Yeah, like it's... such
it might
an
not even
old
be a real
name.
I don't even know. Is it a real name?
I think so. I feel like there's someone named like Hogarth Humphrey.
Hogarth's the last name. Yeah, I think it's just a last name. I mean, if you're listening and your name is Hogarth,
sorry.
And please let us know that you exist. If you're about 22-ish right now, then
it makes sense.
Yeah, it would also explain your name. The Laxative Gag.
Yeah,
that's probably the first time that they've done that in a kids movie.
I don't know, like 1999 maybe, but it was popular around that time. I feel like, I guess for a kids movie, but Dumb and Dumber.
They've definitely done like laxative stuff in film before. Like, I'm not saying this is the first time, but this is probably one of the first time it comes up for kids. We get two kind of potty humor jokes in here with that, and then them opening the door on Hogarth. So they're pretty great moments.
Yeah, because he kept, like, you could tell he was just getting exhausted from it.
Yeah.
Because he kept having to go.
That was so funny because it keeps getting brought up, like he has to go to the bushes, like he's investigating, and then you see the look on his face kind of like crop up like 2-3 times. Yeah, that's awesome.
I looked up the list of laxatives as a comedic thing. One of the first ones is 1994's Dumb and Dumber.
Really?
Yeah.
Wild. So this is fairly new.
They use Turbolax because, yeah, it's almost all newer things. I don't know if there was one before this.
That's wild.
Or before 1999.
That's one of those things that you kind of take for granted now because it comes up so often. It's become, where it's become a staple is in TV and sitcoms. Like there's going to be an episode somewhere of somebody getting laxed or mixing up their medication with laxatives. Yeah. I'm not going to lie to you. This is probably, I wasn't expecting to have this much laxative conversation during this.
Yeah, this is quite a bit.
Anything else that you want to talk about before we wrap her up?
No, that's basically it. It's like we could mention every single thing that made us chuckle, but you
got to watch it for yourself, I think, at that point.
Yeah, and like overall the themes are great.
The art, I really enjoyed the artistic direction of the film.
Yeah, I think that's probably what makes it, like, after like the hard-hitting emotional moments and the comedy, it's the art. Like those three made the movie.
Yeah, I would very much agree. Like, I don't think Pixar-style animation direction would have served the same purpose in this film.
No, yeah.
Okay, cool. I think, so this is coming out next week, end of April. So heading into May, we're doing a director's month. So we're going to pick a director and watch a couple of his famous films. Or maybe director duo. There's a few director duos that I could be down for.
Yeah,
Coen Brothers.
Yeah, Coen Brothers would be... Yeah, that's a problem. There's so many great directors.
Well, that's why we're doing this once a year.
Yeah. I feel like we could only do this though. Like, I mean, we could just do directors.
Oh yeah, I mean, we could
every month a different director.
We could do animation films for a podcast, like old animation films, and it would probably last like.
There's too many movies, Blake.
Yeah, I know. This is the problem.
Yeah, they're so good, and I love every single movie. Annabelle hates how much I love every movie I've ever seen.
I can have very lukewarm receptions for movies, and it's a lot mood. I think for me, I gotta be in the right mood for the movie I'm watching. For me, if a movie can like get me into it in any sense, really, I love it. Yeah, that's fair. Like it's kind of a low bar for, like, if they can just get me into their world, then and keep me there, then it's probably good, and I can appreciate so many things about it. Yeah. If you can't get me in, then that's it. That's fair. Those are bad movies overall, but there's not many that don't get me in. I don't know. I can't think of the last movie that I watched that was outright bad. Like, I watched Reign of Fire last week. I don't know. Ring of Fire? Reign of Fire. Have you ever heard of it? Rain? Like Rein or Rain? The first one. Like king? Like rain? Yeah. A king reigns? Yeah. Reign of Fire? Yeah. Okay. So I haven't seen it. it's I don't recommend it, but it's Christian Bale and Matthew McConaughey, and one of Matthew McConaughey's early roles. It's early 2000s. It's a post-apocalyptic film The set and the setting's really cool. The execution's not great. It's about dragons being awakened and burning the entire world down, and then overpopulating and eating everyone.
With like a bunch of dragons?
Yeah.
Okay.
So dragons have just completely taken over the world.
Huh.
And the settings in the UK, and Christian Bale is kind of leading this small community out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
When Matthew McConaughey comes rolling in as the
He's
Americans.
A dragon? Oh, okay.
And they're on like a mission to
destroy
the dragons. Because they think they figured out like where the source of the dragons are and how they're populating. It, like I said, it's cool in the direction of the post-apocalyptic land, but the dragons often feel like an afterthought throughout. So it's kind of a weird movie. If you like both those actors, you might be kind of interested in it. But it looks cool. It looks cool throughout the film. It's just the whole dragon thing didn't quite land.
What year's the movie from?
I think 2003.
Okay.
So a little bit outside of our realm, but it does feel like an old movie. It feels like an old Mad Max movie.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think we could wrap her up here.
Yeah.
It's a good episode. I'm looking forward to Director's Month. I'm really looking forward to Director's Month,
Yeah, it's going to be a hard choice, but any of them that we pick will be fine, so I guess it's not that hard of a choice. There's so many top directors.